coming down, we had no choice but to fund our military because we have to have, by far, the strongest military in the world.
The president signed the bill just hours after he threatened to veto it. That would have forced the government to shut down tonight. The president tweeted this morning, quote, "I am considering a veto of the omnibus spending bill based on the fact that the 800,000 plus DACA recipients have been totally abandoned by the Democrats, not even mentioned in the bill. And the border wall, which is desperately needed for our national defense, is not fully funded." DACA, of course, refers to undocumented immigrants who came to this country as children through no fault of their own. The spending bill doesn't address them. Some Republican senators had urged President Trump to follow through on the veto threat, not over DACA, but because they oppose the massive price tag. In the end, the president gave it the okay, but said he would never sign a bill like that again. Let's get to the chief White House correspondent, John Roberts. He's live for us on the North Lawn. John.
Trace, good afternoon to you. This has been a real roller coaster. You remember a couple of days ago, the congressional leadership came to the Oval Office and was in a conference call with the president. They walked him through the omnibus bill. The president signed off on it, said that he was going to throw his support behind it. Then we had the veto threat this morning. And then ultimately this afternoon, the president held his nose and signed it. The reason for that being that this omnibus spending bill provides for a $60 billion increase in military spending to some $700 billion. That's the biggest ever. It's $716 billion next year. And it ends the defense sequestration cuts that James Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, says have really hobbled the military over the last few years. The president did threaten that veto this morning, which is when the defense secretary got on the phone to him and said, Mr. President, I really don't think that this is where we want to go with this. But we don't know. I mean, this just could have been a threat from the president. Was never really serious about it because ultimately, he said, he had to sign the bill because of the military spending. So on his way out of the diplomatic reception room this afternoon, I asked the president, well, why threaten to veto it?
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Thank you.
Why the veto threat if you had to sign the bill?
Well, you'll figure it out in about 20 minutes after you look at it. Okay? We're going to figure it out. You're going to figure that out. We looked at it a veto. I looked very seriously at the veto. I was thinking about doing the veto, but because of the incredible gains that we've been able to make for the military, that overrode any of our thinking.
Tracy pointed out in the top that the president also didn't like the bill because there was no provision to protect the so-called Dreamers, nothing for DACA. This afternoon in the diplomatic reception room, the president reached out to Dreamers saying he tried to help them, but the Democrats didn't want any part of it. Listen here.
I say this to DACA recipients, that the Republicans are with you. They want to get your situation taken care of. The Democrats fought us. They just fought every single inch of the way. They did not want DACA in this bill. I do want the Hispanic community to know and DACA recipients to know that Republicans are much more on your side than the Democrats who are using you for their own purposes.
You pointed out, Trace, that the president said he would never, ever sign a bill like this ever again. But with the budget process so horribly broken on Capitol Hill and for so many years, you could probably put down an even bet that the president will face another omnibus spending bill at some point in the future. Trace?
Yeah, let's even money. John Roberts, stand by if you will. The bill showdown came after the latest shakeup at the White House. President Trump replacing his national security advisor, General H.R. McMaster. The White House had previously denied media reports about McMaster leaving. Last week, the president said the stories were, quote, very false. But last night, the president confirmed John Bolton will take McMaster's place. Bolton was a U.S. ambassador to the UN during President George W. Bush's administration. In the past, Bolton has called for the U.S. to bomb Iran and launch a preemptive strike against North Korea. Bolton has also repeatedly defended the U.S. invasion of Iraq, something President Trump has called a terrible mistake. The national security advisor position does not require Senate confirmation, so Bolton is set to take over in a few weeks. Let's go back to John Roberts at the White House. John.
Trace, if you had money on the McMaster horse finally leaving, that horse finally paid off. This has been a long time coming. The president has been thinking about replacing McMaster for a long time. McMaster has been, at least for weeks, if not months, thinking about an exit plan from the White House. It happened right after the leak of that classified memo that was prepared for the president ahead of his call with Vladimir Putin of Russia. But I'm told that that didn't really factor too much into this. It was the fact that the president never really gelled in his relationship with McMaster. And yet every time he sits down with John Bolton, he thinks to himself, I really, really like this guy. You pointed out that John Bolton's got a hawkish view of foreign policy, certainly on Russia. He appears to be much more strident than President Trump does. But in an interview last night with Martha McCallum on The Story, Bolton said despite his past comments, he is going to keep his counsel for the president. Listen here.
I've never been shy about what my views are, but frankly, what I've said in private now is behind me, at least effective April the 9th. And the important thing is what the president says and what advice I give him.
And that's always a wise thing for an aide of the president. What's important is what the president thinks and the advice that I give him. This did seem to happen pretty quickly yesterday afternoon. You know, in terms of the timing, this was definitely a snap decision. The process to get here took a long time. John Bolton was in the Oval Office yesterday afternoon. He left the White House knowing that he had the job, but he didn't expect that the president was going to suddenly tweet about it and tell the world. So that took him by surprise a little bit. One other thing, Trace, that's bubbling up again, it's kind of on a slow rolling boil here, is the imminent departure of the VA Secretary, David Shulkin. There was some indication it might happen as soon as today. They might wait for this Inspector General's report to come out, but the consensus here is that he's gone at some point.
And John, for the record, I had zero money on the McMaster horse pulling out, but $2 on Bolton coming in. I can tell you that right now. And a lot of other people did too, John.
I had a lot of money last week right on the McMaster departure, and it did finally pay off.
Yeah, you're in better tune than I am. John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thank you. President Trump calling on the Senate to change its rules after he decided to sign that spending bill.
To prevent the omnibus situation from ever happening again, I'm calling on Congress to give me a line item veto for all government spending bills, and the Senate must end. They must end the filibuster rule and get down to work.
But don't count on that happening. The Republican Senate leader has said he does not support ending the filibuster rule, and the Supreme Court has ruled that line item vetoes are unconstitutional. Let's get to the chief congressional correspondent, Mike Emanuel. He's live for us on Capitol Hill. Hello, Mike.
Trace, good afternoon to you. President Trump says he won't sign another one of these mega funding bills, so that suggests a showdown perhaps as soon as this fall. This particular $1.3 trillion funding package was negotiated between the big four here in Congress, McConnell, Schumer, Ryan, and Pelosi, in a bipartisan fashion. It is not clear how differently they'll be able to do future spending packages. And Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said numerous times he does not want to change the rules of the Senate to get rid of the filibuster. It's a rare bit of leverage the minority party has, which one day will be the Republicans once again. A veteran Republican senator talked about how difficult it is getting things done.
You've got a political situation where the House doesn't have a lot of flexibility because of divisions within the conference, and the Senate's got a 51-49 majority. So because of that, I mean, you don't have any wiggle room. And the Democrats leverage some power out of that narrow margin that we have. And why they didn't use that power to get DACA out, I'll never understand.
It is worth noting some of the president's allies here on Capitol Hill are working on budget reform. It will be interesting to see if those talks can produce results and perhaps a neater process going forward. Trace.
Yeah, and this time yesterday, Mike, the Republican leadership was pretty much on board saying the president would sign this. What did the Democrats say about the president's veto threat?
Well, they're saying, this was the product of bipartisan talks. When both parties sit down at the table and negotiate together, you get some of what you want. You have to give to get what you want, essentially. And then a Maryland Democrat senator took this swipe at the president.
You've got a president who claims he's the great negotiator, the art of the deal. Where was he when the deal was being made? Wakes up the next day and says he wants something different. He is actually one of the worst negotiators I've ever seen.
With the $1.3 trillion government funding package signed, the threat of a government shutdown is gone until at least the end of September. Expect much of the rest of this year here on Capitol Hill to be about those midterm elections in November. Trace.
No doubt. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Manuel, he's live for us at Capitol Hill. Mike, thank you. Ahead, we'll discuss all of this with Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace, and that is coming up next. This week at the White House, President Trump signed a massive spending bill that he called ridiculous, one that the president had even suggested he might veto. And as far as the revolving door goes, President Trump's top attorney in the Russia investigation resigned, and President Trump also named his third national security advisor, third in just over a year in office. Keep in mind, that's all in just the past 2 days. Let's bring in Chris Wallace. He's the anchor of Fox News Sunday. I guess first the budget bill. Chris, good to see you, first of all, sir. And secondly, what did you make of the veto threat? Because yesterday at this time, it seemed like the Republican leadership was all on the same page that he was going to sign this thing. This morning, we get the tweet that he might threaten to veto this thing. And then it seemed like at the press conference, he was just like, nah, we were going to sign it the whole time.
You know, I don't know what to make of it, because it wasn't just Republican leaders, Trace, who were talking about the White House was on board. It was the president's own budget director in the White House briefing room yesterday who said the president was going to sign this bill. And he acted today as if this was all a surprise. Congress and the White House is always in negotiations on this. They came up with this idea, the spending plan, which everybody talked about, busting the budget $1.3 trillion 6 weeks ago. All they've done over the last 6 weeks is put some more details into the spending. But this was already agreed to then. And I have to say also, for the president suddenly to talk about DACA and the wall, Democrats came to the White House and offered the president a deal in return for protecting 1.8 million dreamers and people eligible for that. They were going to give them the $25 billion of spending for the wall weeks ago. The president turned it down, said he wanted the end to the visa lottery, a sharp restriction on chain migration. Not to say it's right or wrong, but again, you sort of wonder, where has the president been while he and his team have been negotiating for months on all these issues?
Yeah, it's a very good point. You know, I was watching, kind of switching over now to H.R. McMaster and John Bolton. I was watching your exceptional coverage yesterday, Chris, when this announcement came down, you and Jennifer Griffin and Catherine Herridge. And the common theme in that seemed to be that, look, you know, we've got John Bolton, who's against the Iran deal. He does not think we should deal with North Korea. You know, he thinks the U.S. Embassy in Israel was a great idea. But he also made it very clear that the president is the one who got elected and the president makes the decisions.
Yeah, I mean, having said that, H.R. McMaster wasn't trying to overrule the president. He's a general. He's part of the military command. He understood who got elected. I think that the switch from McMaster was more about personality than it was about policy. What I'm told is that the president likes a freewheeling discussion. McMaster would get in there in sessions with the president, and he briefed him almost every day, and it would be very orderly. Point one, point two, and long details as to why point one should be this way. And the president didn't like it, and in fact, even sometimes ridiculed him and said, "Why are you so serious?" Now, having said that, John Bolton is pretty serious too and has very strong opinions when it comes to foreign policy. And I'm curious to see how the two of them are going to get along. Frankly, also curious to see the dynamics of the new foreign policy team, because you're going to have Pompeo in for Tillerson. You're going to have Bolton in for McMaster. And then and I can't wait to see how McMaster gets along with James Mattis, the retired general and defense secretary, because they both have pretty strong opinions and somewhat different. Bolton definitely more of a hawk than Mattis is.
Yeah, and speaking on that, I want to give you John Bolton's opinion back in August, because you've interviewed him a million times, and so have I. He's the same on camera as he is off, and he said this, quoting, "North Korea test launched on Friday its first ballistic missile potentially capable of hitting America's east coast." He goes on to say that if thereby proved the failure of 25 years of U.S. non-proliferation policy, a single-minded rogue state can pocket diplomatic concessions and withstand sustained economic sanctions to build the deliverable nuclear weapons. It is past time for Washington to bury this ineffective carrots and sticks approach. What do you think of this upcoming summit between Kim Jong-un and Trump? Does it happen?
It certainly indicates that at least the advice, obviously the president will decide what he wants to do, that the advice from Bolton is going to be pretty tough. He has said he thinks that the president ought to go in there. I'm talking about before his appointment yesterday, and basically say to Kim, look, are you going to denuclearize or not? And if Kim says, hems in any way, say, well, we're finished talking. John Bolton had an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal just a week or so ago in which he laid out the legal case for a preemptive strike on North Korea. Now, if you're going in there to try to say, look, if you don't basically surrender now, it's going to get very ugly very quickly, then Bolton may help. But if the president really is willing and interested in negotiating and a somewhat prolonged diplomatic process, I'm not sure John Bolton is along for that ride.
Yeah. Chris Wallace, always good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Trace.
Well, this weekend on Fox News Sunday, Chris talks with Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, also Cameron Kasky, a student who survived last month's school shooting in Parkland, Florida. He is helping to organize tomorrow's March for Our Lives rally in Washington, D.C. And Delaney Tarr, another survivor turned activist who warned lawmakers, we are coming after you. Well, Islamic State terrorists now claiming credit for the attack at a French supermarket that left 3 people dead. Ahead, what intelligence insiders are saying, plus the story of the hero French officer who swapped his own safety for a hostage. A New York City firefighter died overnight battling a fire on a movie set. Fire officials say Michael Davidson somehow became separated from his crew and got injured. He died later at the hospital. Davidson had worked for the New York City Fire Department for 15 years. The fire happened on the set of the movie Motherless Brooklyn in Harlem. It stars Ed Norton and Bruce Willis. The New York Post reports Norton saw smoke and told a cop. The movie producers expressed their condolences and called Davidson and the other firefighters real-life superheroes. Meantime, Islamic State terrorists claim one of a supermarket in southern France today. Happened about an hour south and east of Toulouse. French police say the attack lasted for hours. It started when a gunman fired at some police officers, wounding one of them. He then took hostages inside a supermarket and murdered 3 people before officers raided the building and killed him. More than a dozen people are hurt, among them one very brave police officer. The French Interior Minister says that officer offered himself as a hostage to get a civilian set free. And when the suspect accepted, the officer left his cell phone on so cops could listen to what was happening inside. Jillian Turner is live for us in Washington with more on this. Jillian.
So, Trace, we've got some new insight into what ISIS and its sympathizers were doing as the attack was unfolding, thanks to sources who monitor ISIS-linked operatives on a platform called Telegram. As soon as the attack was reported this morning, sources tell Fox News they saw an explosion of postings about the attack from ISIS affiliates on certain Telegram channels. This is what intelligence officials refer to as terrorist chatter. These operatives soon established a new Telegram channel dedicated solely to discussion about the ongoing attack in real time. They began trying to energize ISIS affiliates and encourage followers to immediately get out there and execute follow-on attacks. Finally, just before 11 a.m. EST, ISIS issued an actual claim of responsibility via Amaq, their so-called news agency, claiming the French attack was carried out by, quote, a soldier of the Islamic State. So it's clear, Trace, that ISIS wants to be in control of this latest attack and that it also wants to create the impression the perpetrator was following directives from ISIS. While the claim has yet to be confirmed, if it is, this attack will become the first major incident on President Emmanuel Macron's watch since he assumed office last May. Trace?
Yeah, and Jillian, this is just the latest in a string of recent attacks.
That's right. This attack comes in a moment when France remains on a high alert nationwide as the result of a cluster of Islamist attacks beginning in 2015. At the beginning of that year, there was a major attack on the Paris headquarters of satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. 12 people were killed. Later that year, in November 2015, ISIS rampaged the city of Paris again with a coordinated slew of attacks at restaurants, bars, and the Bataclan Theater. 130 people perished in that attack. Then in July 2016, ISIS claimed responsibility for an attack in which one of their sympathizers drove a truck through a Bastille Day celebration. That attack killed 84 people. As a result of all of this, France's government had imposed a state of emergency that was only lifted last October, just 5 months ago. The military personnel have remained stationed at major transportation sites and tourist hubs ever since then. So we were prepared, they were prepared, but apparently not prepared well enough for this one. Trace?
Right. Jillian Turner live for us in D.C. Jillian, thank you. Coming up, more on President Trump's pick for National Security Advisor, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN and Fox News contributor John Bolton. I'll speak with a reporter about Bolton's.
Gabriel with the Fox Report now and more headlines from the Fox News deck. A car bomb exploding outside a sports stadium in southern Afghanistan, killing at least 12 people and hurting dozens more. That's according to a public health official there. It happened as people were leaving celebrations for the Afghan New Year. A giant T-Rex at a dinosaur theme park in Colorado bursting into flames happened in Cannon City, about 90 miles south of Denver. The owner of the park says that he thinks there was an electrical malfunction. The T-Rex is 24 feet tall and appeared to be breathing fire at some points. The owner says he hopes to replace that by the summer. And a fist fight erupting between two lawmakers during a government meeting happened in the country of Georgia, not the state, on Monday. But we just got that video. The city assembly members were apparently arguing about the formation of a new political faction. When things got heated, they had minor injuries. The news continues with Trace Gallagher right after this.
President Trump's pick for National Security Advisor, quote, won't take anybody's crap. And the president feels he'll finally get the foreign policy approach he wants. That, according to the reporting of my next guest. Jonathan Swan is a national political reporter for Axios. He's got a piece out today on what he calls the clashes to come now that John Bolton is joining the Trump administration. Jonathan, great to see you. I was kind of reading this, and you say at some point there that you believe that allies of H.R. McMaster believe that General Mattis and outgoing Secretary of State Rex Tillerson treated McMaster like crap. And then you write, quoting here, sources who know Bolton expect he will stare down Mattis, tell him when he's wrong, and will be a Henry Kissinger-type presence in the room. Now that Tillerson is gone, he could fundamentally tip the balance of power on Trump's national security team, senior officials expect. How does that play in the West Wing, Jonathan?
Firstly, if you speak to anybody who has a close relationship with H.R. McMaster, they will tell you exactly the same thing as I reported there. There was basically a triumvirate with Rex Tillerson, James Mattis, and to some extent John Kelly. But really, it was Rex Tillerson and James Mattis who people who've watched them in action say they really viewed themselves as protecting the world, almost a bulwark against Donald Trump and Donald Trump's instincts. That was very much the way that they conceived of what they were doing. Restraining Trump's instincts. They opposed him on the Iran deal. He wanted to tear it up. They thought that he should, give it more of a chance. They opposed his decision to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem because they thought it would inflame the Arab region. And McMaster was sort of isolated there. They pushed him around. He was a 3-star to their 4-star. And John Bolton is a very different character. He is going to come in there, sources close to him tell me, and he will stare down Mattis, and he will be very forthright in his opinions. Also, particularly on the issues of Iran and North Korea, he has told the president, I will reflect your positions on these issues. There's no ambiguity about where John Bolton stands on these two issues.
So you talk about how the triumvirate was, and now you've got John Bolton in there and Mike Pompeo.
Right.
And, Bolton has made it very clear, look, here's the deal. He's in favor of the embassy in Jerusalem. He's in favor of pulling this Iran deal. He's in favor of not talking. So the question becomes, this is an entirely different game. Does that put the North Korea talks on shaky ground in your assessment?
I believe so, because they're already. Let's be realistic. And again, anyone internally in the White House would tell you this. The North Korea talks are already on shaky grounds. Yes, the president's agreed to them, but we haven't really got a solid message back from the North Koreans. It's all being mediated through the South Koreans. They have their own agenda. There's a lot of discussion about where could we hold such a meeting? What do the North Koreans have to actually do for it to happen? And Bolton has been very, very clear about this. He believes the only language that Kim Jong-un would understand is the credible threat of military force. He does not have the patience for the diplomatic track that James Mattis and Rex Tillerson had.
Yeah, and he is a hawk, Jonathan. I'll give you that. And I've interviewed him a dozen times, and he's the same. I was telling Chris Wallace, the same on camera as he is off camera. He's a brilliant guy. Whether you disagree with him or not, he's a brilliant guy, but he's also very pragmatic. So this is not a guy who's going to say, okay, Mr. Trump, we need to go in there and do a preemptive strike against North Korea first day in office. Correct?
I mean, nowhere have I written anything like that, and I think that there is some hyperbole about John Bolton's views. But look, he's on the record advocating the argument for a preemptive strike against North Korea. He believes that, yes, people can call him a warmonger, people can use all these pejoratives to describe him, but the way he sees it is it's unacceptable to let North Korea get a nuclear weapon, and he believes in using American military force to stop them getting that. And he believes that the other side, the people who are saying, no, it's unthinkable, just are afraid to confront that basic question of whether you would allow North Korea to get weapons. So you're right, no one's saying day one, but I think, look, he's been very clear about what he believes on the record.
Sure. Yeah, and it's true. It's a very good piece, very fascinating. Jonathan Swan, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the new head of the National Security Agency's Cybersecurity Division giving her first national TV interview to Fox News. Marianne Bailey spoke about threats from hackers in North Korea, China, and Russia. She talked to our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, who is now live for us in Washington. Catherine.
Well, Trace, her job is protecting thousands of U.S. government systems and networks, including the Defense Department, which, according to the NSA's Marianne Bailey, are under attack hundreds of thousands of times every day. And she spoke exclusively with Fox about how lone hackers can do just as much damage as nations like Iran, China, and Russia.
It could be a nation state trying to get in to get secrets or maybe to disrupt our operations. It could be anybody. So cybersecurity is a leveler. You don't have to be a nation state to have really advanced tools and actually invoke damage.
Earlier this week, Fox News spent time at the highly secretive National Security Agency, where Bailey explained the evolving threat from these nations, as well as terror groups like ISIS, and that it goes beyond hacking traditional government computer networks to weapon systems that include the black suitcase, nicknamed the nuclear football, always seen near the president, that authorizes a nuclear attack.
So you're trying to ensure the cybersecurity of the nuclear football?
Absolutely. There's nothing that's off the plate, and that's kind of the scary thing about cybersecurity. Our adversaries are looking at every and any opportunity to use cyber to get an advantage.
And that also goes to the security of things like satellites that they have no contact with once they launch for years at a time, Trace.
And Catherine, Fox News also got access to the cybersecurity SWAT teams as well?
Well, that's right. When there's a major cybersecurity event targeting U.S. government or military networks, the NSA either calls in or dispatches these teams of specialists to limit the damage and identify the hackers. They work out of a command center at NSA headquarters, and they rarely speak publicly. They're known as cyber defenders or part of the cyber red team or SWAT team. In this case, we met a 28-year-old who studied computer programming and combined his love of competitive football for the job.
So it's my job to actually catch hackers when they hack our systems. It's my job to not only identify hackers that are in our system, but more importantly, how they got in. So if we don't identify how they got in, they can get in again.
What we heard on a visit to the NSA really kind of amplified the recent testimony of the incoming nominee for the head of the NSA, General Nakasone, which is that technology has really created so much opportunity, but it's also created tremendous risk, especially for these U.S. government systems. Some of them are, real legacy systems, so they're pretty antiquated, Trace.
Yeah, great stuff. Catherine?
You're
Catherine
welcome.
Herridge, live for us in D.C. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, lawmakers asking Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg to testify on Capitol Hill after accusations that a political consulting firm used data from 50 million users to try and sway the 2016 election. In a statement, leaders of the Senate Commerce Committee said his testimony is needed to figure out how Facebook plans to gain users' trust back and safeguard their information in the future. Some folks say they're deleting their Facebook accounts following the scandal, but even if you delete your profile, Facebook still has all of your information. Laura Engel is live with that part of the story in New York. Laura.
Hey, Trace. Well, it's a little easier said than done. You know, it takes a couple of steps, but people say it's not necessarily so hard to get all the way off of Facebook. But here's the deal. You've got those couple of steps, and it could take a couple of months to get off Facebook entirely. Plus, if you have information through your friends and family, it can still be on there on Facebook. So tech experts say the first step is to download before you delete so you can keep your user history, photos, and chats. However, according to Facebook's Help Center page, your data, which was posted by friends and family members, will remain on Facebook as long as those people have accounts. One former Facebook user told us today the privacy issue has really bothered him.
I found out that you really don't have any control over who Facebook shares your information with. The only control I have is to delete my account, and hopefully that'll ensure that my data is not shared with people that I don't want it to be shared with.
And as we've been hearing, Facebook CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg has said he's been working to find out, to get to the exact bottom line of how this happened, and so that it won't happen again. Trace.
And Laura, the founder of SpaceX and Tesla, deleting the company's accounts as well.
Yes, this is happening today, and actually it's been quite a back and forth on Twitter. The CEO and founder Elon Musk has been having this back and forth. We've been watching it today unfold. It started when Musk replied to a tweet earlier this week from Brian Acton, the co-founder of WhatsApp, who sold the social media messaging site to Facebook in 2014. Acton tweeting this: "It is time, #delete Facebook." Musk replied to the tweet asking, "What's Facebook?" Then later promised to delete his company's account after admitting he didn't realize SpaceX had a Facebook page. Now, as far as how many people who have hit that delete button so far, we won't know until Facebook posts its quarterly report in late April, early May, when they reveal that information. In the meantime, some people who do business on Facebook are doing a slow roll to end their relationship.
I'm going to delete Facebook at the end of this week, but I wanted to give everybody time to see my posts, to see that I was leaving, and one of the main things that I keep posting on every single one of them is make sure you have my number so that you can get in contact with me.
And there are advertisers pulling out as well, Mozilla and a German bank, and Trace, even Cher has deleted her Facebook account. Back to you.
No, say it isn't so.
It's true.
Laura Ingle live for us in New York. Great to see you, Laura. Thank you.
Good to see you. Thanks.
Well, protests erupting in California's capital after cops shot and killed an unarmed black man. What police are saying about it now, plus we have the body camera footage from the night it happened coming up and going down. The Dow again. Today it's down 341 so far. We're being told it's on the China tariff fears, but China only retaliated saying, look, we're going to impose $3 billion of tariffs on the U.S. versus your $25 billion on us. Seems like a fair trade. We will dig into why the Dow is going down again, along with your 401ks, as Fox News continues.